One reform you would implement if you were railway minister for a day.
Kill this feudal way of working totally, in word and spirit, totally. And somebody finding violating it should be dealt with seriously, because we are all Indians. It's just that there's somebody is in a leadership role, somebody is not, but we have to treat everyone with respect and no feudal way of working.
One thing about Indian Railways the public doesn't know but should.
People perhaps don't recognize, and of course they don't know, is that 10% of railwaymen, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, are gems, and they are the most committed workforce of any organization in this country, particularly among supervisors and staff. 10% of them. Unmatched.
Craziest railway experience during your 38-year career.
Once I was coming by a local train and I was alone in that coach except one gentleman, a fierce looking gentleman standing next to me. So I thought that dangerous for me to travel with this guy with nobody else in the coach. So I kept looking at him and he kept looking at me. I thought if I get down now, then it will look as if I'm a big coward. So I somehow sat there, but I thought let me keep looking at him. Then came a station, and after 2-3 stations, and this fellow got down and left the coach. Next station, I got down and I was walking towards the footover bridge or whatever. Then I found that this guy was sitting in the next coach. So I went back, asked my friend, yeah, I do have a beard and all that, but do I look fierce? Fiercer than this fierce guy who was there in the coach?
So, folks, you have tuned into TGV and hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series, the world's only quadrilingual podcast at this moment of recording. And we are trying to embark into multiple languages as we speak. And here we embark on transformative conversations for a better future. And we want to simplify and amplify your journey to success. I'm your host, Navin Samala, dedicated to making the world a better place by bringing you wisdom through valuable discussions with experts designed to simplify and amplify your success. And thank you so much for tuning in. So, folks, we have reached the 650th milestone episode on the Guiding Voice podcast series and presenting you none other than the author of this book, Dr. Sudhanshu Mani. Not only is an author of this book, he is the legendary creator of India's first semi-high-speed train, and he is a retired IRS officer, Indian Railway Services officer, and he has over 38 years in railways. He has spent over 38 years in Indian Railways. He's known for navigating systemic red tape to deliver world-class innovation. And today, as I mentioned earlier, he's an author and thought leader and a symbol of transformative leadership in the public sector. So I'm fortunate to have witnessed his talk during Zinov Confluence, a annual conference of techies, which is held in Bengaluru every year. And I'm super honored and humbled to have Dr. Sudhanshu Maniji on the platform. In fact, I'm little nervous today talking to a giant leader like Sudhanshu ji. So first of all, Sudhanshu ji, hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm fine today.
All right. So, first things first, like, why should somebody tune into our conversation today? I would like to hear from your end.
Why should anyone tune in? That will be very pretentious for me to tell you or tell anyone. But we will talk about story of leadership, how to tackle challenges, passion and commitment. And if there are some takeaways for people who are listening, we'll be happy.
Absolutely. So, folks, stay tuned for this power-packed conversation. You're going to learn a lot. Every word that comes from Sudhanshu sir's mouth is something which is really thought-provoking and so inspiring. And I was really fortunate to witness his talk live. And today I'm presenting you proudly Dr. Sudhanshu Maniji on TGV, the Guiding Voice podcast series. So, folks, today we are going to discuss an interesting topic: engineering change in a rigid system, the Vande Bharat story. And just to give you a brief background, before Vande Bharat train was named so. It was called as the Train 18. So before we talk about the making of Train 18, here is an exciting twist as always. So first of all, let us tickle our guest's brain first. So Sudhanshu sir, get ready for a rapid fire round of random words. I'm going to mention a few, and I would love to hear the first thing that comes to your mind in response without thinking much. If you're ready, let's get started.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Steve Ahern, one of the judges of the Asia Podcast Awards. I'm interrupting this episode to let you know that you're listening to an award-winning podcast. This podcast won its category in the 2024 Podcast Awards, so you know you're listening to quality. Enjoy your listening experience, and congratulations to the team who created this award-winning podcast for you.
My first word is curiosity.
Does not kill.
Invention.
Restless chutzpah.
Future.
An enjoyable uncertainty.
Enjoyable uncertainty. Wow. And then bureaucracy in one word.
Babudam.
Leadership.
Empathy.
Success.
Commitment and passion.
Commitment and passion. Awesome. And then Train 18 in just one word.
Aspirational.
Wow. And then life.
Good.
Career.
Does not matter.
Here comes the last one. Aliens.
USA. That's because, they call foreigners aliens.
Aliens. Yeah. When we fill up the visa form. Yeah. I get it.
Always thought aliens were living in some planet far away, but in USA, you visit USA as an Indian, you are an alien. Like I am at present in USA, I'm an alien today.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for participating in the first rapid fire round and also for being part of our journey in shaping the careers and lives of millions across the globe. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm literally on cloud nine having you on the podcast as a guest. And sir, let's get started. I would like to know from you, who is your guiding voice?
My guiding spirit. Well, you see, the guiding spirit is always in my mind, back of my mind. Our minds may not be where today the Japanese or the German minds are, but we have to make sure that we do our best. And that's the guiding spirit, that as Indians, we have to try to excel as far as possible. And as that becomes a habit, we will, I'm sure, someday we'll reach where the exalted minds in West or Japan or US are. We have to reach there.
And someday they should say we should be like Indians. I think that dream will.
Oh, that will be an icing on the cake. Absolutely. Why not? They're already saying, in some respects, for example, ISRO, they have an unmatched record, but I don't think we have too many examples today. We need much more.
Yeah. And we are slowly getting there and truly optimistic about the future. Sir, now talk to us about your success mantra, as in top 3 things that have contributed to your success so far.
One is, of course, these are all things which I learned. These are not anything original. So I will begin with empathy. It's very important. You start thinking, great about yourself, and then you learn that it's very, very important for you to succeed anywhere. And that I say empathy, but it's actually love and empathy, that you must regard everyone, unless there is a case not to do that. There may be some cases. And put yourself, before reacting to any situation, in somebody else's shoes. Number 2, which I learned, is, of course, trust. There is a significant lack of trust in leaders today. I mean, we don't trust people. That's a legacy of the British. And we think that trusting people will lead to more corruption or chaos. Or my belief is that if we start trusting people in leadership position or otherwise, a lot of things would get done. And believe me, give people responsibility, corruption would actually come down, not go up. As we have seen all these years after independence, in spite of this system of mistrust and distrust, corruption has been going up. It's not coming down. So it's time to try trust. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of successes. And third is, of course, pride and vanity, which I If you were there in Bangalore, you would have heard it. I consider it very, very important. It's very important to feel pride in what you
Yeah.
do. And that pride is something that is a feel good. You are proud of what you do. You are proud of people you work with. And it's an emotion of upliftment. It uplifts you even as you are being nice to everyone. Vanity kills. You try to belittle others to elevate yourself. And someday somebody will kill your vanity because there's nobody made so perfect that his vanity will last. So it's better you kill your vanity yourself. Now, these are easier said than done, but I learned it from my seniors and tried to do as far as possible. So I would say differentiate between pride and vanity, pride and arrogance. Adopt pride, but never adopt arrogance and vanity.
Excellent, thought provoking, and thank you for sharing so candidly. And when it comes to Train 18, I think you guys were able to build it in 18 months and make it operational, which is a kind of world class example. And it was not just about building a train, but more about battling bureaucracy, right? So, how did you challenge the status quo without losing your job?
So you see, whenever I joined railways in long back, 4 years of traineeship with railways, only dedicated traineeship, then railways, uh, and as you said, 38 years in active service. In spite of such a large network and such a large group of engineers, I always felt that why our trains always look the same, box type structure. Why can't we have an aesthetically superior, technologically advanced, modern, speedier train? It was always in my back of my mind and sometimes front of my mind. Um, but there were many bureaucratic issues, which we will perhaps talk of later on. But when I was posted as the general manager of Integral Coach Factory, Chennai, it's the largest production unit
Mhm.
of Indian Railways and one of the largest coach making factories in the world, except that it does more of the same. Used to do more of the same, not that much induction of technology or novelty. So the staff
Right.
there, the engineers there had gone through a series of technology of transfer, right? And they were adopting that, but it's always there's something that you don't get when you get into a transfer of technology. They had the chutzpah, they had the audacity to try something new. Uh, they also had a similar dream, if you can call it, of doing something new for the country. So my vision and dream and their vision and dream, there was a lot of synergy in that, and we thought, yes, this is the platform, the opportunity, the fortune of such a good team to do something for the country in the shape of a modern, aesthetically near world class. I won't call it world class train, and that's was the beginning.
Mhm.
So fortune was finding such a team because without teamwork, nothing could be possible. One man cannot do anything. So everything, kind of worked out, and it was sheer pleasure working on the project for those actually 18 months. We had set a target of 21 months after getting the sanction. It actually got done in 18 months, living up to its name once again. We had called it Train 18 when we started work in April 2017 that the train must get out of ICF before I retire, which was December 18. I was the one retiring the first from amongst the team. So this, in a nutshell, is the story of the Team 18 team of Integral Coach Factory, Chennai.
Mhm. Yeah. So, being in Indian Railways, have you ever imagined that you would get an opportunity to work on a project like that during your early stage of career or mid career?
Absolutely. So Indian Railways, offers a great deal of opportunities. It's just that it's bureaucracy and bowdom rules, but there is no dearth of opportunity if you want to set out to do something. This train was not it's one of the achievements I'm fortunate to have been associated with, but we also built under leadership of Research Design and Standards Organization, which I was headed, where I headed the locomotive wing. in association with Diesel Locomotive Works Varanasi and EMD of USA, we built a 5,500 horsepower diesel locomotives, which was in a way only the third country to do so in the world after USA and China. So it offers a great opportunity, uh, in spite of the bureaucracy, and if one is committed enough and has less doubts about oneself, and of course has a good team of similar thinkers, a lot can be done. So to that extent, I cannot fault Indian Railways at all. There are a lot of things which have to be improved. There are a lot of talent which is going wasted. Absolutely. But given the obstructions and given the drawbacks, it's still possible to do a lot.
Sure, sure. And let's talk about some of the outrageous roadblocks you faced from within the system while building Train 18.
Oh, so there were many. So I'm not a great engineer. All the engineering work, I knew the team, engineering team, and industry. The industry in the country has really developed in last, what should I say, about 20, 25 years than railways themselves, because they don't have shackles of bureaucracy. So they are able to innovate. All they need is support from railways. So there are some companies like that who have developed products which could go into a train. Train means the shell is made in ICF, the main shell of the train, and the bogie on which it moves. But there are so many equipment which have to go into the train, which have to be outsourced. So industry was up to do it. The team was up to it. As a leader, I had to only make sure that these roadblocks don't come in way. One was to, even although the GMs have been in part to spend whatever money they want, thanks to this government, cases don't go to the ministry for sanction and so on. So that's a big step which was taken in Mr. Prabhu's time when he was railway minister. But still, building a train which has no locomotives and only coaches, only 2 cabs in the end, all equipment under the board, and which would run at 180 kilometers per hour. So it made a new animal, and you needed a stamp from the board. You could not just go ahead on your own, and which we were not getting. First bureaucratic hurdle, because people thought that we were only trying to seek publicity, trying to spin a yarn, seeking publicity, coming in way of import, because there was a lobby to import such trains. So we were not getting the sanction in spite of our proposal going in November of 2016 till March of 2017. There was no more word from Railway Board to start work. We were almost getting very diffident about the project when. So that was the first challenge which I could tackle only by going to the chairman directly and requesting him to give us the sanction. As he was wavering, as I told him that day, and I have told others, actually, I fell at his feet to give us the sanction for 2 trains. Import whatever he wants. Who am I to stop you?
Right.
And the gentleman, one Mr. A.K. Mittal, God bless his soul, he's no more. So he finally relented and we got the sanction to build 2 trains. After that, we said, enough of bureaucracy. We are cocooning ourselves from other railway organizations. We don't want any interference. We will build it and show Indian Railways that we are capable of reaching world. We will not reach there, but we will somewhere be in the vicinity by making this train. This was the biggest challenge, right? At the beginning before the project began. Then, of course, there are challenges like a good team, but they said that this is being done for the first time in the country, and if it fails, then who will be the scapegoat? If it succeeds, we are all going to bask in that glory. So that time I had to, in a way, boost the team by saying that this man is retiring first in December 18, and if the train fails, and then it's 200 crores down the drain, then I'll be the best scapegoat. I was, secure in the belief that I would retire. What would they do to a retired person? Actually, they tried. I was wrong. But these little things, give a boost to a team which is, raring to go.
Yeah.
So this challenge was overcome by giving them giving them that confidence that don't doubt yourself. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
As you see, when you do something and there is an outcome of value, that's defined as success. Actually, that's wrong. If you do something and give it your commitment, your passion, your hard work, your everything, your life, in a way you have succeeded. You can't do more than that. The outcome may not be in your hand, but fear of that outcome of value prevents you from trying. Like my uncle Shakespeare has said that our doubts are traitors which make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. And then one poet has also said, गिरते हैं शहसवार ही मैदान जंग में, वो तिफल क्या गिरे जो घुटने के बल चले. So I said, dear, days of your crawling on your feet are over. Don't doubt yourself. You are capable. Don't look at the success. Look at the work at hand. And if not today, if not before my retirement, after my retirement, you will succeed. These words are not hollow words. They may be just words, but they help. So this was overcome in this manner. Then there were many small challenges. I'll tell you one more, which was so a project of this magnitude, starting from concept to design, to engineer, to manufacture, to validate, test, prove out, turn out. It's a process, serial process. It cannot go parallel. You go to a good company, worldwide rolling stock major like Siemens or Alstom, they will ask for a new train design to be completed, turned out it'll be a matter of 36 to 48 months. He said, now we are in April 17, we have the sanction, yes, but you gentlemen are retiring in December 18, we have 21 months. By the time you retire, we would have just made some drawings. Procurement would just have started. Parts would not have arrived. Manufacture would not have started. So the next leader may say, why are you purchasing this trouble? Go do more of the same what you have been doing. And who asked you to do it? So where would we be? All our excitement and more than that, our hard work, where would that be? So I said, yes, that's a problem and a challenge. And the only way that can be tackled is by remembering who we are. As in Hamlet, there's a dialogue. So we know what we are, but know not what we may be. So you know what you are, and now think of what you may be, which means you do something which has never been done earlier. We work like donkeys, burn our midnight oil, and we will go from design to turn out before I retire, which has never been done in the world for a new train. So we will work, burn our midnight oil means work to everyone else's time, right from morning 7 o'clock to late night, 8, 9 o'clock. And so, everyone worked very hard. I was only, enjoying their work, looking at them, but they were the ones who were working. And fortune favors the brave. It actually got turned out in October of 2018, precisely 18 months after we started. And that's why it lived up to its name once again as Train 18. Actually, these were the challenges. The technical challenges I told you was a great team was already tackling in the best ways possible.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just to sum it up, right, in case if you are not afraid or if you forget the fear of failure, you can do anything. This is a perfect example of the making of Train 18. Also, I want to understand why
I mean, what I'll just qualify it. You should not be foolhardy.
Yeah.
Like if that stage somebody has said, go and design a 300 kilometers per hour train.
Right.
Now that's being foolhardy. You have not reached. You have to go in steps. Today, if they say make a 240 kilometers per hour trains using the same team, in 2019-20 itself, I would have taken that challenge.
Right.
I believe they're starting now. So don't be foolhardy, but it should be a challenge which should be at this point out of your reach.
Right.
It should challenge you 120, 130% more, and your pride will make sure that you achieve that. Even if you fail once, success is going to come.
Yeah.
So this was the spirit.
Mhm. And got it. So this is a highly visible project. In case if it fails, right, then things would have been little different. And if you have followed the traditional path and played it safe, definitely it would have never happened, right? So my question is more on what gave you the courage to take these calculated risks in a risk-averse environment and all. So did you have that particular inner gut feel right from the day one when you thought about it, or what did it happen internally?
See, another Shakespeare word which says honesty is the
Mhm.
best policy, which means it's not lip service. If you are honest in what you're doing, then your half your fear is gone,
Right.
right? It's a guilty mind which is always suspicious. So,
Mm.
in case you're doing something honestly, you make mistakes. So you'll not be afraid. And the team that had chosen itself was also of the same mold. So, so to answer your question, as I said, job at hand, how to do it, you formulate it and then concentrate on that. If you think too much about outcome, then you will have doubt. There's quite likelihood of failure, but that should not worry you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed your question. So what was the question?
No, my question was more in terms of like, did you have that particular gut feel and courage? Okay, saying that yes, it is going to work right from
Oh
day
yeah,
one when you
okay,
thought.
yeah. So I knew we had a great team. We had gone through interaction. I could judge that perhaps the best team possible in the country to build a project of this size and this magnitude, this significance. So that gave you confidence. And you see, the biggest quality of team members is when leader is in doubt, they should not be, again, it should not be like a pandemic that everyone comes to doubt. Real good, strong team members would come and give you confidence. And that was possible with this team. If I was in doubt, this team would say, oh, don't worry, this will happen. I was fortunate to have that kind of team. So it was not a question of my courage alone. It was a question of the capability and the
Yeah.
team spirit and the commitment and the passion of the team. All this combined together.
Yeah.
That's why I said they had that chutzpah, that the audacity to try something new with a confidence that most likely it will succeed. Nobody can guarantee 100%. So, yeah.
Excellent. I see a lot of motivation in you as a leader, and that might have really boosted the team's morale and spirit as well. And with that, let's move to the next one. I would like to understand what does innovation mean in a bureaucratic setup, and is Jugaad a sustainable model in such systems?
Okay. Well, I recently wrote about it. So, Jugaad, some people totally dismiss it, and some people say that it's something totally, what should I say? I mean, something that kills. But that's not the question. That's not correct. So, Jugaad is what is Jugaad? When you have lack of resources, funds, uh, time, then you find a solution to a problem, usually an engineering problem. But it can apply to anything. It can apply, that intrigue can go in any situation. You find a solution uh, to solve that problem. It could be a temporary solution, it could be a makeshift solution, but it solves your problem at this time. So it has its own value. But uh, if you want to go to world class products, if you want to reach where Japan or China have reached, Japan was there 90 years back. That time, Japanese goods were considered shoddy goods, Japani mal. 20 years back, Chinese goods were considered Chini mal. No jugaad is going to work. In fact, jugaad has to be banished. There cannot be a easy makeshift solution in manufacturing. You really want to manufacture world class product, you have to go by the copybook for quality. In case things are getting delayed because of some problem here and there, it's better to face that delay instead of employing jugaad. So jugaad has its use in day-to-day maintenance, many situations. So I'll not run it down. But to develop world-class products, jugaad has to be banished. And that's why I say, you see, innovation innovation comes out of, as perhaps you had asked me earlier, but it comes out of a restlessness, uh, a chutzpah, some audacity, uh, and that restlessness can lead to a tranquility of achieving something, some new innovation. If you are complacent, it would never happen. So yeah, so that's it. Innovation is it can be big or small, but it must come out from a anxiety to solve a problem in a certain manner, so that either the process or the product becomes superior, and then that time you use your audacity, your chutzpah to try something new. Just remember, you try 10 innovations, 9 would fail, right? Not all 10 are going to succeed. But I won't say that those 9 attempts are a waste. They are lessons for you to keep on trying again and come out with a successful product.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Got it. I think Jugaad is essential, especially when you're resource constrained and all. And excellent, sir. And now let's talk about the leadership aspect. So many a times people think about leadership is all about managing peers and managing downwards, but you often speak about managing up, right? Which is very, very important, especially in a bureaucratic environment. And also, my question is like, how can young leaders drive change without formal authority in a hierarchical structure?
Oh, so, all right. So, first, you have to speak and you have to attempt something which is
Hmm.
organizationally, structurally, a little bit beyond what you are considered to deliver. I'll give you an example. So, how do you choose a
Sure.
team in a government organization? You don't have the freedom to hire people like a private CEO can. Although the powers given to you, authority given to you, are more than a CEO of a large public sector company for a large private sector company, but there's certain things you cannot do is
Yeah.
hire a big team. Now you have to do with the team you have. And my belief is that in whichever situation, 10 to 20% or even more are such committed people who carry the organization on their shoulder. You have to recognize them. How do you recognize them? They would choose themselves. It's the judge responsibility of that person who's judging, not those who are being judged. My method was very simple. In day-to-day interaction, you would also always come to know that here is a person who is not going to be bogged down by this problem or that problem, has the spark to do something new. So my question would be very simple when dealing with all officers. When I used to meet them, first of all, you must meet and listen, and not only talk. As leaders, we like to talk. Listen to people. They know more than you. You just come as a leader, but your depth, your knowledge does not match them. So listen to them and ask them a couple of questions. One question would be, uh, define your job. What do you do? So
Mhm.
most people who have spent 30 years, 35 years would tell you exactly what they have been saying for 35 years. So that person is of no use to. He may be for regular for work, but he is not a good team member for something for any significant project. There will be people who would say something which is beyond what is expected of them. See, I mean, uh, it's no good being in a job, looking back and saying, "I have been very busy. I've worked so hard." That's useless. You should be able to look back and say that if I was not there on that chair or that position, this would not have happened. So the people who said these things became automatic choice. Another thing I would ask them is, gentlemen, including supervisors, not only officers, that you have worked here for so long.
Mhm.
We always curse our boss
Mhm.
among ourselves. You say, "Yaar, this fellow
Mhm.
is so bad. He should do this thing like this, but he doesn't understand." Now who would go and tell him? This is our favorite pastime. Fair enough. So I would ask these people, if if you are the GM today, what
Mhm.
is what are the two things that you will do to improve the organization? One that you are sure that a GM can do, and second, which a GM can try.
Right.
Now, that's,
Mhm.
in my view, it was a wonderful way to judge people. Now, there are people with 35 years of service who would say things which even Modi ji cannot do. So the fellow has some kind of vague notion of what should be done, but he has no knowledge, no idea as to how it can be done. That's why he's telling you something that a GM cannot do. I'm saying even Modi ji cannot do. I mean, there are so many examples.
Mhm.
But
Right.
if somebody tells you something which is doable, I said, you have all the powers of the GM. You have to tell me how you're going to do it. And if somebody tells you things, see, I had double benefit. First of all, I came to know of a good team member and I got an idea. I get my agenda also from these people. Okay, yeah, this fellow says this should be done, and this is how he says it should be done, and it's good for the organization. I, as GM, should now try this. And I know that this man can deliver. So this was a way of the. So in this way, a team chooses itself. There are people, hardworking people, but
Mhm.
they are not cut out for a special job. So you're not ignoring them. They are not part of the central team for a significant project. Uh, so again, I've gone astray. I think I answered your question, but if I have not, you can ask me again.
No, no, you have answered the question. And next, my next one is like your story is something very unique, and it proves that one person can make a huge difference. So my question is more in terms of understanding the mindset.
Let me stop you
Yeah.
there.
Please.
Actually, it is not so unique. You see, there have been great people
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
who have done, and they have been inspirations, and they have shown how one man can do things
Right.
with the help of a team. It starts at independence with one Mr. Karnal Singh, chief engineer in Northeast, later became chairman. He built a 200-kilometer plus railway line connecting the Northeast with India. When East Pakistan got separated, there was no rail connectivity. In 1 year,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what leadership?
Right.
Then you had one Mr. N.S. Gujral, the chairman railway board. He improved the revenue of railway by certain measures in goods transportation. Scindia, as minister, gave us Shatabdi, a modern reservation system, uh, even catering reforms. Sridharan. Sridharan
Metro.
is the reason that all these metros, it's not just DMRC, it's all these metros which are coming out, and most of them get done fast. Unlike projects in our country, which go for years and years. All the metro projects get done fast is because of the legacy of that one man, Dr. Sridharan. So I stopped you there. There have been great inspiration, and all railwaymen. Railwaymen in a way, either railway minister or railway officers. There have been many. Yeah, now I let you go with the question.
That's so humble of you, and in fact, and at the same time, great reminder as well. Because in modern terms, right, where we have something which has happened in the recent times and all that way, it is very unique and very inspirational. And talking about the mindset shift, I'm referring to what are some mindset shifts that are necessary for today's civil servants to drive impact, just like you did and other leaders have done.
So I was fortunate in a way. You see,
Hmm.
so there has to be. It's no good saying that you go out and try and use things and don't think of consequences, and that will be very pretentious. In my own case, because of the jealousies and corruption of certain colleagues and so on, we had to go through the tension of vigilance inquiry because people didn't like. They were stopped from importing. They didn't like the publicity. They didn't like the love the country gave us. So I had retired. I thought, but doesn't matter to me that much. Actually, there was stress. We were not afraid because there is nothing wrong. We knew this is all your damn squib. Nothing would happen. But certain team members were still in service. They suffered. Some of them got extricated. Some of them did not and actually suffered. So this is an example which would prevent people from going out of the way to implement things. So it's no good my saying that don't be afraid, just go out, do things. Then that's fine. But I would strongly say that an atmosphere of fearlessness and trust, which I talked of, has to be built in by the government. That's my priority number one. And shed this feudal way of governance in government. It's still so feudal, very, very feudal between those administered and those administering. They think they are from another world, as if they are also colonizers. These two things shed this protocol, propriety, hierarchy. Totally, things will improve. We will think that if we maintain that distance, then people will listen to us. Those days are gone. It has to be leadership through empathy, through commitment, and by way of an example. So, two things. There are many things, but two things are very important, and that must come from the government: is to demolish this feudal way of thinking. Demolish this. It can be done. Prime Minister tried, but it got limited to only, removing the bacon lights from the cars and so on, which got, that red, green light and all that is gone, but it has come out in some other way. Now, earlier it used to be one car with a bacon. Now there is a pilot car in front. So there's no bacon light on your car, but there's a pilot car taking you around. So people have not really followed it in spirit at all. That is very important. And number two, as I say, build trust. Once this is done, it's not a matter of Sudhanshu Mani or Dr. Sridharan or somebody. It's most of the people do want to do good work. They will be incentivized to deliver to the organization. That's, I would say that's very, very important. It's no good lecturing people on go ahead and take risk and do, because the environment for doing that is not really very conducive. It has to be built first. Of course, if it doesn't get built first, I can tell people that you should still try, because if you're honest, you may go through stress, you may go through humiliation, but you will get inner satisfaction of having done something. I would still say that, quoting my example. But it would be much better if the environment, a conducive environment, is built and more people are incentivized to do something. It's there in them. They are capable. It's just the bureaucracy prevents them from doing it. They are in their zone of comfort and they don't want to wander out.
Got it. And what will be your message to people in government roles who are passionate, but they might feel stifled by bureaucracy, right? So,
yeah, okay. So even if such a conducive atmosphere is not made available, I would still say that everyone has dreams, right? I'm sure all of us, everyone has a dream, has things in their mind they want to do. So don't be in a hurry. Have patience. Wait for and it's not a single dream. People have many things they want to do. That day in the talk, I did say it was not about the train alone. It was about play on Ghalib that I produced. It was also about 5,500 horsepower locomotive. It was about making Bangalore head load free. It was about making Sikandrabad station, the Safai Walas there, dignity and love for their work, to provide them that through good protective uniforms, through equipment and so on. All these things, you can have multiple dreams and wait for the opportunity. It will come your way. Don't be in a hurry. But when it comes, then give everything that you have. And as I quote those wonderful words of the people's president, APJ Abdul Kalam, and the dream is not the thing that you see in sleep. The dream is the thing that doesn't let you sleep. That's the time as a leader to give it everything that you have. So that'll be my message. I mean, even awaiting these change in environment and so on, Wait and do pursue your dreams, and you'll be a happy man in spite of all the troubles.
Patience and perseverance are going to play a critical role, and dreams are something which will not let you sleep.
Absolutely, absolutely. First patience, and then opportunity comes, then perseverance, commitment, and passion.
Amazing, sir. And this has been an incredible conversation and a lot of leadership insights. And there is a lot to learn from this one. And it's time for us to add some more excitement and add some fun to the episode, which means it's time for us to dive into a series of intriguing second rapid fire questions. So if you're ready, let's get started.
Oh, one more. Okay. All right. All right.
Okay. So my format is a little different. Try to get the personal side of the guest as well because normally professional side can be discussed, but
Yeah. Yeah.
questions I get to know the other side. So my next first bullet out of second rapid fire round is if you could have one gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
It would say think. Why I tell you, you see the environment today. A lot of things people say today, they say it without thinking. They say it as a habit which has come through the discourse which is going on all along. Wait and think, and you will find that
Yeah.
there's a lot of judgment that you have to make. I would say think.
So powerful. And can you describe yourself in just one word?
Ordinary.
Extraordinary. No, that is
No, not at all. That's the point. That's the point. A lot of people who are jealous who say, "Hey, yaar, what's this? He was not good in this. He was not good in that. What he's got lucky." True, true. I am ordinary. I got lucky. That's also true. But because I got the team, but I did have a dream which I pursued. So yeah.
excellent. And next one is like craziest railway experience during your 38-year career.
Okay. So, okay, there have been many. So since you asked, it'll take a minute to describe. I found it very crazy. I was working on even in my probation period, when I was young, I was hardly like 22 years old. We was working in Mumbai. A train was being built called Great Indian Rover. All right. So on behalf of Eastern Railway, I was in Mumbai relaying to Calcutta what was being done in Matunga workshop and Parel workshop in Mumbai, so that same could be replicated. So the entire 3 coaches were built here, 3 there, something like that, so that the train has uniformity. But that's not material. What happened? So I used to go late, go movies, go plays, especially in Kulaba area or Prithvi Theatre or someplace, and come out late by local trains, of course. So once I was coming by a local train and I was alone in that coach except one gentleman, a fierce looking gentleman standing next to. So I thought that now it's a little dangerous for me to travel with this guy with nobody else in the coach. So I kept looking at him and he kept looking at me. I thought if I get down now, then it'll look as if I'm a big coward. So I somehow sat there, but I thought, let me keep looking at him. Then came a station, and after 2, 3 stations, and this fellow got down and left the coach. I was relieved. I said, no, it's okay. So this fellow, his station has come, he's gone. Next station, I got down, and I was walking towards the footover bridge or whatever. And then I found that this guy was sitting in the next coach. So I went back, asked my friend, yeah, I do have a beard and all that, but do I look fierce? Fiercer than this fierce guy who was there in the coach? But this is what happened. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So here comes my next one again. And this is one of my favorite questions. Like one reform you would implement if you were railway minister for a day.
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, I've already spoken about it. And that would be kill this feudal way of working. Totally. In word and spirit.
Okay.
Totally. And somebody finding violating it should be dealt with seriously because we are all Indians. It's just that there's somebody is in a leadership role, somebody is not. But so we have to treat everyone with respect and no feudal way of working.
Good one. And then a book that changed your thinking.
Okay, actually, there were many, but one I would recommend for people to read
Mhm.
to find purpose in life. This I read long back. I think I must have been 17, 18 years old, but it affected me quite a lot. There's a book called The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. In fact, The Razor's Edge,
There is a
this title comes from a shlok of Kalidas, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the shlok. So his life is like a razor's edge, but a very, very powerful story. And I recommend it to people. Nowadays, Somerset Maugham is not very much in fashion. So many great writers have come after that. But since you asked, that book really affected me positively. Positively.
yeah. I'll add it to my
Yeah.
yeah. I'll definitely
Yeah,
add it
you
to my
should.
reading list. And then yeah. So one thing I'm going to flip the question. Like earlier, I asked about the weirdest experience kind of thing. Now, favorite train journey ever as a passenger.
Okay. So it has to be in India, first of all. I've traveled in train many places, but a journey which has left an imprint on me is not Darjeeling or Shimla or Nilgiris or whatever. I remember, well, I would have been 14 years old. And we were going
Mhm.
from Lucknow to Guwahati in a train that used to run on meter gauge. It used to be called Awadh Tirhut Mail, 80 Mail, blue colored, pulled by two steam engines and later by single diesel. That's not important. So in Bengal, there's a station, Siliguri, right? In meter
Mhm.
gauge, that Siliguri. And uh, about an hour or so after that is a station called New Mall Junction. Now, I don't know how it is today. So I've traveled once or twice by train after that, but it was at night. I don't. But I remember from Siliguri to New Mall Junction, that hour and a half was so captivating. It goes through, foothills,
Mhm.
smaller hills, and so on. But it was extremely captivating, and it left an imprint. And I have this passion, this mind to do that journey once again. We did it 2, 3 times, but unfortunately, it was at night. So maybe I'll be disappointed by what I see today. But I live with that memory as a very pleasant railway journey. I spellbound. I was at the window for that 1.5 hours. Yes, or less, 1 hour 15 minutes or so. Yeah.
Got it. And one thing about Indian railways, the public doesn't know but should.
Yeah. So I would say that people perhaps don't recognize, and of course they don't know, is that 10% of railwaymen, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, are gems, and they are the most
Mhm.
committed workforce of any organization in this country. Let me tell you that Indian Railways has. And they are the people who would never say no to anything. And if they are saying no, that means the job cannot be done. That's a wealth Indian Railways has. They have to be put to great use. I must say, it's not something just because I'm a railwayman that I'm telling. I have worked in other ministries, I'll say. I've seen now after retirement, I've seen private sector, and that belief of mine has become even stronger. The kind of committed, passionate people at every level, particularly among supervisors and staff, 10% of them, unmatched
Mhm.
for any organization. So this is something I would love that people should know. I'm not saying this about the rest 90%, but those 10%, they make Indian Railways what it is today.
Yeah. Kudos to them. Kudos to them. And we have been talking about bureaucracy from the other side, but this question is more like, have you ever done any bureaucratic thing and regretted?
Of course, so many. Absolutely. I mean, all life started with bureaucracy, trained, steeped in bureaucracy, and it was a slow learning experience from leaders above me or below me.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and 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 so it took such a long time. So there's a regret that if I had not had done these, if I had started on this path of whatever I've told you today, right from the beginning, maybe I would have had a much more happy service life. It was happy as it is, but I'll give you an example. That it comes out of that feudal mindset. When we joined, we were told that the way to stamp your authority and to make sure that things work is by punishing people. Show yourself as a strong leader. You have to punish people. What is called a charge sheet. Is somebody charged with somebody, then he replies, and then you decide his increment is stopped or whatever, his classes and PTOs which they get as privilege are stopped, or things like that. So I slowly realized, and I was a Rotary, and I became a Rotary, became a votary of that, used that system, and I thought I was doing great. And people were afraid of me as a great officer who would stand no nonsense, will issue charge sheet, suspension, whatever punishment. Slowly, I realized that it was all useless nonsense, and it only alienates you and is counterproductive. Absolutely useless. But it took time to learn that. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Then you'll realize what I'm saying. I was in a diesel locomotive shed in Bardhaman. It housed about 75 locomotives, and every locomotive has a water pump, which has to be overhauled every year. So 75 roughly per year, which makes it every third, fourth day a water pump would come for repair, right?
Yeah.
There was only one man. Everyone, whole shed said, this gentleman is an expert. All his life he has been doing water pump, and he is the last word. You want to learn about water pump? Stand next to him. I did that. Stood next to him. Learned water pump. How absolutely meticulously how he would repair the water pump. And I talked to him nicely and learned from him, thanked him, and so on. In the afternoon, he came to me. He got the guts to come to me because of the way perhaps I talked. And he brought 3-4 sheets. He said, sir, every year I do 75 pumps. 74 of them work very well. One of them fails. For that one, I get a charge sheet. I don't reply, sir. I do my job properly. What do I reply? So I have these 3 souvenirs of last 3 years. This organization gives me this reward for working passionately. I was stunned. I was stunned. This shed of 1,000 people cannot do without this guy who's the only one who really knows. And he's the one getting charge sheeted because one pump failed out of 75. That told me that this was so counterproductive to keep charge sheet punishing people. Because look at the paradox. My eyes opened that day, and gradually I said, no, this charge sheet business. If you want to really punish somebody, throw him out. It's possible in government. It's possible. People don't use it. Issue a proper charge sheet procedure to throw out the fellow. Don't keep a disgruntled fellow in the organization. He'll always be a back EMF. But if there is, like this example, then just counsel him. Pat his back. It's humanly possible that out of 75, one would fail. You can ask him if there is any constraint, how I can help you. Make him a team member. His sincerity that he was doing good job, but the organization was making sure that he should not do his job properly. So this was the thing I totally regretted. Initial 5-6 years of my service life, or maybe more, I actually did so much damage to the organization by treating this, this doctrine of punishing people.
Thanks for sharing that so candidly. And here comes the last one for the second rapid fire round. What is one electronic gadget or a fantasy gadget that you'd like to see or invent yourself?
See or invent myself?
Yeah.
I don't have much. I think whatever I can think of, today I have cannot think of anything readily. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sure. No worries. And that was amazing second rapid fire. And let's flip back to the mainstream. So, what the top two lessons can corporate leaders take from your experience with the Train 18 about leading change in resistant systems? Just two top changes.
Okay, so when it's corporate, at least it's not so feudal. But I will not say it's it's free of feudal thinking. I've seen it has rubbed off in private sector, the Indian mindset, and they also follow this. So I would also say for private sector also, one thing is definitely trust. I'm consulting, I don't see that trust in leadership from the top to bottom. Absolutely. Don't put people in that position if you can't trust them. I'm not saying everyone is trustworthy. Having put somebody in the position, it has to be complete trust. It has to be that trust and pat on the back. Instead of giving guidance, give confidence to the person to seek guidance if he requires. Don't be overbearing to go and start parting with guidance which is not needed. Right? So that's fun. And number two is, of course, which private sector. First in government, because government is a big spender and they have to inculcate the spirit of ownership and pride of doing your own. You beg, borrow, steal, whatever. Stamp it with your own creativity. I would tell private sector also that, of course, government must encourage, but within the limits of what you have today, whatever you do, tell your people to have a stamp of creativity in your products. That will give you ownership. And that ownership will give you pride to make you do 120, 130% more than what you are otherwise capable of. That risk, the private sector leadership has to take, but within limits, not like government. See, the government has no bottom line. Private sector has bottom line. I respect that. But within those limits, give as much as possible that feeling of pride to your people.
Yeah. I think creativity is the most coveted skill in the area of artificial intelligence, and that is something which cannot be replaced as well. So that's a spot on. And sir, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, such an enlightening one, and really looking forward to hosting you again on the show. And how is your experience being hosted on the Guiding Voice platform?
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was a little different from so many podcasts I've done. So thank you. You had a different slant, which I liked. Thank you very much.
And friends, that was our episode with Dr. Sudhanshu Mani, the man behind Train 18. And in case if you want to know the full story, it is available in the form of his first book, My Train 18 Story. So it is available on Amazon. I'm going to publish the links to the book as well as Sudhanshuji's LinkedIn profile as well. So go ahead and grab a copy and learn all the leadership nuances from this particular book. And before we jump into the fun trivia section, we have a quick request. If you have enjoyed the conversation and found it useful, request you to share with at least three of your friends or colleagues who would also like TGV. And also, make sure that you spread the knowledge and help others grow just like you. And as we wrap up this fascinating conversation with the trailblazer of Train 18, Sudhanshu Maniji, let's leave you with a couple of lesser known nuggets from the rich history of railways. Folks, did you know the world's very first recorded railway system was not powered by steam, but by human muscle? In ancient Greece around 600 BC, carts were manually pushed along stone grooves to transport boats across the Dolkos trackway near Corinth. And here is another twist. Railways were never originally meant to carry people. In early 1800s, England rail lines were built mainly to haul coal from mines to ports. It was only later that someone dared to ask, what if we put people in those wagons too? Right? So, from stone tracks to steel giants, and now to India's semi high speed marvels like Vande Bharat Express, this journey reflects what is possible when bold minds like Sudhanshu Mani sir refuse to let red tape derail progress. So, thank you so much for tuning into The Guiding Voice. And, folks, thank you so much for showing your love. We have already reached 650th milestone. And until next time, keep questioning, keep building, and always stay on track. So see you all in the next episode. See you all in the next episode with another amazing guest. Until then, take care. Love you all. Bye bye.